Fellow compatriots, Zambia is trapped. Zambia is a nation yearning to enter her destiny. And for this country to achieve the ultimate purpose that the Almighty brought it forth for, it will take the citizens and no one else to put Zambia on the path to those once glorious days again. The Public Order Act is birthed in shame. It is birthed in evil. It is birthed in anything possible or imaginable against liberties and freedoms. What is the history of this Public Order Act, which we have nursed, which have nurtured, which have entertained until now? I will calmly, as much as possible, and structurally help our country to go through what this entails, where it came from, its origin, and how we have failed to come out of this trap called the Public Order Act. So, because of the sacrosanct nature of this topic, I have decided to do some notes. Normally, most of these topics I can speak off the cuff, but I've done some notes so that all of us can follow clearly in order for us to educate our young people out there. Every voter must understand, every young people, every young person, shall I say, every young person, every elderly person, women and men, they must come to the full understanding of what this entails. So what is the Public Order Act? What are its origins? The origin of the Public Order Act is in what is called the Public Ordinance of 1955. So it's a colonial statute. Let me repeat that. What we call the Public Order Act today started in 1955 as the Public Order Ordinance, a statute of the colonial masters, the colonial government, a statute of the Northern Rhodesia government. Now, what was the aim of this ordinance? It was created by the colonial government to predominantly control all movements that had been birthed to fight for independence. Mind you, by 1953, Zambia was a federation of Rhodesia and Nyasaland. We had ANC, but we had also other political movements that had emerged. The Zambia Party or Zambia African National Congress, among others. And apart from that, remember the Mine Workers Union, among other groups that emerged. Remember the 1933 Luanshya uprising, when for the very first time African miners stood up to demand for a right. They stood up to demand for equal work, equal pay. They stood up to fight against the Calabar in working conditions, the apartheid system in working conditions. There was no legislation then in 1933 when they rose to demand for their rights as workers who are running the mines at Antwerp. And that Luanshya uprising gave impetus to the first form of organization, or to, shall I say, to organize the forms of kind of resistance against the colonial masters. So, this ordinance was aimed at stopping all movements that were fighting for freedom, that were fighting for the rights, the right to vote. Remember, 3 Africans made 1 vote. Those were on the upper row. 1 man, 1 vote was applicable only to the white nationalists. So, we need to understand, therefore, that the aim of the colonial government was to stop all kinds of movements for freedom, for liberty, for development, in other words, which was beneficial to our founding fathers and mothers. Then this legislation, it was aimed at regulating public assemblies and processions, as is right, and of course, everybody stood up, even though the colonial government provided for all these kind of restrictions in the freedom of assembly and association to suppress dissidents and to also limit to freedoms. It did not work. Whereas there was this piece of ordinance, nationalists, understanding that the human spirit cannot be caged by anybody. Not even God can cage the human spirit. What do I mean by that? It's God who gave us the Torah. He gave us the Bible. He gave us the regulations. He gave us the ordinances. The Bible is no longer in heaven. It's here on earth with men. And therefore, the very rules in the Bible that God has given us, they bind God also, because those are his ordinances. God does not change. So, when we're talking about freedom, remember the Tower of Babel. The Almighty God had the power to destroy the human race. Just by a breath or his word, the entire human race was going to be wiped out. But he had to respect his own law, because he doesn't change. So, therefore, this freedom that we are talking about, as I will show later, it's sacred, and no one can trample upon the freedom of the people. So its roots are in the colonial yoke. So it's a colonial yoke. The Public Order Act is a colonial yoke. Now, in the post-independence era, the new government inherited this act, and what did they do? They started to strengthen this piece of legislation, this ordinance, now making it an act. And these are the things that I'm going to go through now, so you can understand. So, the new government, the NIP government, the very thing that they fought against when they were fighting for freedom, the same nationalists. When I'm saying same nationalists, I'm talking about those who had the power to be in government under Dr. Kenneth Kaunda. Aware that, first and foremost, the first president of Zambia was imposed by way of Section 10 of Schedule 2 of the Order in Council, a product of the Zambia Independence Act of 1964, Section 65 of the Laws of England. Remember that point, it's very important. So, because they knew that their government was somewhere unstable, because there were other credible movements. There was the African National Congress, among others, that was too formidable. So, the new government immediately adopted this same piece of legislation. They wanted to strengthen it in order to use it for the same purpose for which the colonial government used it. Against, mind you, the same very reasons that they themselves, the same leaders who were in power, were fighting against. So critics of the government were punished using this same Public Order Act. So now, what are some of the issues now that we as the citizens of Zambia must be able to focus our attention on when we're doing this Public Order Act? Number one, we need to understand that we cannot entertain a piece of legislation which first was used against freedom fighters, it was used against nationalists, it was used against our founding fathers and mothers. The same piece of legislation, this ordinance, which was issued here in Northern Rhodesia, it was not applicable in the United Kingdom. People are free to demonstrate. But here, they introduced it. Now, what has happened is this. The current version that we have was revised, I think, on 31st December 1996. That is section 113 of the laws of Zambia. But then also remember, in another instance called section 104, but I'll go through all that, time allowing. But I want to focus on the main purpose of addressing this issue. So, as I said, it was an ordinance. And then the colonial government kept on amending it to entrench the powers of controlling, of putting a grip on the freedom fighters. So after enacting it as an ordinance, then they amended it. Then it was called the Zambia Public Ordinance Act, number 38 of 1955. Then again, 1956, because it was not like working for them after putting a grip. Then they amended it again. It was called number 17 of 1956. The same one was amended. It became number 10 of 1959. Remember, 1959, the Zambia African National Congress was banned. Remember that? So, in order to ensure that Cha was stopped, it was amended to further put a grip in 1959. It was called Amendment, that's number 10 of 1959. Then, number 28 of 1959, the same year, 2 times. Remember that? They're still amending it to entrench some of the anti-liberty clauses. Again, number 51 of 1960, 19 of 1968, number 69 of 1965, number 10 of 1967. Now, this was post-independence, by the way. Number 25 of 1969. Now, remember what time in 1969? We are going to election year. So again, now, our own government, the UNIP government, amended it to further stifle debate, freedoms of association, freedom of assembly, freedom of conscience. Then again amended, and it was called number 51 of 1970. Now by this time it was called an act of parliament, an act, not an ordinance. And then again in 1977, remember 1977, UNIP government was going to the General Conference in 1978 thereabout. When the UNIP government changed the constitution, when after, remember 1973-72, UPP, ANC, and all political parties were outlawed. UNIP became the only political party. Now, all these nationalists, therefore, were members of UNIP, which was the only allowed political party. Now, what they did was they rejoined UNIP a year before going to the conference. What did they want? They wanted to go and defeat Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, because these are men who stood for the good of this country. So they amended the UNIP constitution that whoever wants to stand for presidency of UNIP must be a member of UNIP for an unbroken record of 5 years. So, and this is also, it also goes with amendment of the same Public Order Act. Think about this. In 1977. Then again, 1985, it was amended, and it was called number 28 of 1985. Because this time food riots started in Zambia. People were rioting because there were shortages under UNIP. The economy was collapsing. People wanted food on the table. People wanted stable electricity. People wanted a quality education. They wanted stable transport. These were basics. To stifle that, they amended it in 1985. The same was amended again in 1994. Now this was under the Mumudi government, and it was called number 13 of 1994. Again, 1996, it was amended, and it was called number 36 of 1996. Then again, government notice number 230 okay. This one, I think I've covered it already. What I wanted to go under the notices of all these kind of amendments. Fellow citizens, therefore, what we have today is a colonial piece of legislation, which was aimed at stopping the freedom, which was aimed at stopping the liberties, which was aimed at stopping you and I being born in a country of the free. It was not applicable, as I said, where colonial masters came from in UK. It was not applicable. This was only done here because according to colonial masters, we were inferior. Remember the Calabar. So how can we entertain a piece of legislation? It's like South Africa, coming from the apartheid system, and then they decide to maintain the same principles of apartheid. How can the people of South Africa say they're freely independent if they're entertaining the same system that they fought against? What has befallen us as a country? How can the self-preservation of a political group, a small group that is in power, want to outweigh, to crowd out the interest of the majority of the citizens? These are fundamental questions that we need to ask ourselves. And we need to know that power, by its very nature, is ephemeral, meaning it's temporary, it's fleeting in nature. You are in power today, tomorrow you go. How many of the most powerful men that we had in this republic lie at Embassy Park, helplessly? Dr. Kenneth Kaunda, may so rest in peace. President Mwanawasa, President Chiluba, President Banda, President Sata, may their souls rest in peace. And now, President Lungu, of blessed memory, may so rest in peace. When we look at this, what makes anybody who assumes that role, what makes anybody who is part of the government to think that they are permanent? The only permanent kingdom is the kingdom of God. If there is any element or anything, any element in your iota of the fear of God, the fear of Hashem, the honor of the universe, you have to stop and think and do what is just. For the same rights that you are denying the ordinary citizens today, you cry far over them tomorrow. Why can't we learn lessons we can learn some lessons. Why can't we learn from the abuses that we went through when others were in power? Now that we have the power, we need to be courageous enough to do the right things. We don't need anybody else to come and tell us to do what is right. And I'm going to explain, time allowing, why it is important to address these important issues. Why these important issues are strategic, they are central, they are pivotal to the running of the economy. God willing, I'll try and explain so you can understand the linkages. Learn something, please, our dear brothers and sisters in the governing party. We are appealing to you out of love of God, out of love of neighbor, that please sit down and reflect. Let me get a little bit, and I'm so sorry. I know data is very expensive. Let me give you this story of a king. It's a Talmudic story of a king who was very popular. One day this king went in the field, and then he found a young man who was a skilled hunter. He took him, and then he appointed him as treasurer of the kingdom. Now, all others who were part of that kingdom became jealous of this young man because he was stealing. And after they came up with fabricated stories that he was stealing the money, the king said, all right, what do we do? So we need to go to his house. Fast forward, they went to his house. They arrived there. And then they searched the house. They found that, by the way, all the books we were balancing was not stealing. He was very faithful to the crown. So they searched all the rooms. There was nothing. He didn't steal anything, this humble young man. Said, okay. Then there was a room, a small room. It was locked. Said, open this. And all his enemies thought, they were sure that that's where the resources are. What his plunder, his loot. They opened. And then they found the same things, this memorabilia of everything, memorabilia of what this young man was using when he was a hunter. Spears, all these kind of things. The catapults. So I was asked the question, wow, why have we maintained these things that we found you with when you were, before you were elevated to be the treasurer of the kingdom? He said, every day I knock off, I enter into this room. I look at all these tools I was using to remind me that I was once just a simple hunter. So that brings humility in my heart, because I remember where I came from. The king wept. He was elevated even further. So what am I trying to say? Forgetfulness is the mother of all sins. It's the mother of all great fallings. Let us not forget where we're coming from. Sometimes we go through difficulties. We go through punishments. Like the current regime, you had your own share of the misapplication of the abuse of the Public Order Act. Today, you have the instruments of power. Why can't you decide to do what is just? If it was wrong then, why should it be right today that you're in power? A foolish person wants to wait to make his own mistakes and then from his mistakes. A wise person must learn from the mistakes of others. Why can't you learn from the mistakes of the PF government? They hijacked PF, I must be clear. They hijacked PF, just like we have the hijacked UPND, because the UPND are suffering together with the rest of the citizens. Hijackers are the ones who are controlling key positions, who are not there. Some of them were in the Mumbi government, some of them also served in the PF government, and they have jumped in the current government. These are hijackers. PF went through the same kind of situation. Why can't you learn from that and decide under God? If you have even 1% of the fear of heaven, today you think that you are the most powerful person. Tomorrow, remember, there is embassy back waiting. Remember that you are a mere mortal. We are all mortals. This is very, very important. And speaking as a Jew, it's written in the Varim, in Deuteronomy, that a king must have a Sefer Torah. Why should the king have a Sefer Torah? So that the king can remind himself or herself every day, or king, queen, every day, that there's God above him. You may think that you are in charge. I own Zambia. I own everything. You don't own anything. All that is fiction. The only true reality is God. Everything else is fleeting in nature. Do what is just. This piece of legislation, which is embedded in the colonial yoke, cannot be entertained to be a yoke upon us today when we are a free nation. Now, this takes me to citizens' rights or human rights. Human rights are not given by anybody. There is no government on earth that gives human rights as they give to the people. Human rights, the first giver of human rights, freedoms. The first giver of freedoms is God. That's why there's what is called free will. If you people, you say you pray, even know the Bibles, your Bibles. What are those Bibles for? Are they for politics? Those Bibles you hold, you know that there's what is called free will. Every human being is given free will by the Almighty God. Everything, of course, is predestined, but the Almighty God gives every human being free will. So, the source of freedom is not any president, it's not any minister, it's not any government, but God. Very important point to note. Now, who is the giver of the rights? The people in any free country, any free nation, give themselves the rights. They decide that what shall be our rights. It's the people who decide under God. And then they codify those rights under a document called the Constitution. Zambia does not have a constitution, remember that. We are still being governed by an act of parliament, a foreign piece of legislation from England. Remember that. We'll keep talking about this topic until it sinks into the minds of the people, and it is ingrained in the minds of the people so they can understand where we are and that we need freedom. We need to come out of this yoke, out of this shell, and rediscover ourselves as a nation. Now, what does this, when I'm talking about human rights, this rule book called the Constitution, it restricts the excesses of the state, not the people. It restricts the excesses of the governing individuals. Because when you become a government of the day, you have the monopoly over violence. You have the police, you have the army, you have all these weapons of warfare, instruments of violence. And you have seen governments abuse some of these instruments against their own people. If you look at the people who died during the struggle for independence, the number is insignificant as compared to those who died under African dictators, African rulers, who after assuming the power, they became dictators, they became villains, they became monsters against their own people. Africa must be ashamed of herself. Compare with countries like America. When America got her independence from Britain, America decided to give herself a durable document called the Constitution, a rule book, which has stood the test of time. To entrench all the rights and to put restrictions on the state. Not even the most powerful man in terms of governance of the President of America can have abuses. There are restrictions. No one is above the law. We come to the rule of law. Rule of law is simply governance not according to men, but according to the law. Where a human being does not become the source of the law. Where a human being does not unilaterally stand up and become the source of the law over millions. So governance not according to men. That is the rule of law. But according to the law, and there is equality before the law. This is the best protection and assurance of everybody who is a citizen in any country or a visitor. That there are all these guarantees that are entrenched. Now, what are some of these laws? There's Torah law for Jews. Canon law for Catholics. It's not about the law of Bishop Banda, of Bishop Lungu, of Bishop Chama, Archbishop Chama, sorry, Archbishop Banda, Archbishop Chama, Archbishop Benjamin Piri. No, it's canon law. It's applicable to Catholics. Another source, Sharia law, applicable to Muslims. No Muslim can claim to be more powerful than another. They stick by their rule book. And then we come to governments, nations. What law? We're talking about civil law. And this is the constitutional law. Constitutional law for countries. And when I'm talking about the constitution, it even supersedes, because I'm talking about an independent state, a sovereign state. It supersedes, therefore, all others. You may have your religious laws, except countries that are Islamic, where they allow in their own constitutions that Sharia law applies to all Muslims. They acknowledge in their constitutions. You go to the state of Israel, yes. Rabbinic law, I'm talking about the halakha. It will apply to the religious Jews, but there's a state law which supersedes everything else when it comes to the country. So therefore, the source of all the rights that you are talking about must be the mother of laws, the basic charter of one nation, the Constitution. And therefore, such codes, when you codify what we agreed was a people, that Zambia be governed according to the following regulations, these are rights that are entrenched. You entrench some rights, the right to association, the right to conscience, assembly, all kinds of liberties. Once you entrench them, you codify them. That becomes a rule book, and no one is above that rule book. That's the point that I'm trying to drive here. But what are other tenets when I'm talking about rule of law or the enforcement even of these rights that citizens have? In order for this to be guaranteed or to be actualized or to be executed on the ground, you need an independent judiciary. Now, here's a tragedy which we have in our country. Whereas in other countries, yes, the president can appoint judges, but the president has no power whatsoever to remove a judge. Look at America. You cannot. Judges enjoy the security of tenure. How will a judge who knows that if I don't pass the judgment in accordance with the whims and caprices of the governing party, I'm going to be removed? How can such a judge pass fair judgment? How can such a judge be impartial? What we have put upon ourselves is a problem, because Zambia doesn't have a constitution. It's only an act of parliament that you can keep amending, like the same Public Order Act. We also need a sovereign legislature if rule of law is to be entrenched in our country. We don't need a parliament, a national assembly, where members of parliament are intimidated, where members of parliament cannot debate, where you have a chair who participates in the debate and there's evidence. Backbenchers have a right to speak for the people. And it's for those in the front bench to answer the questions, to be accountable to the people. You cannot remove the sovereignty of members of parliament from the National Assembly. Parliament of the trinity of the three branches of government. Parliament is the only wing where there is sovereignty, where the people have representatives that they directly elected to go and represent them. Every constituency has someone representing them. And therefore, trying to stifle debate, trying to interfere with debate, trying to interfere with the freedom of speech on the House, it's an attempt, not an attempt, it's a direct affront against the people. It's like you are saying, Chawama constituency, you have no right to speak. All you people of Chawama, you are not wise. It's an insult to the people. That's how sacrosanct, that's how sacred the parliament is. So we're talking about a rule of law. We need a parliament that is truly independent, a parliament that is expressive, that can exercise oversight over all wings of government. We also need impartial institutions of governance. What are these? The Electoral Commission of Zambia, the police. The police does not belong to any political grouping. The police is a state police. It's Zambia police. It's not UPND police. It's not PF police. It's a Zambia police. The police must be given space. And I must be very clear again about this. When it comes to appointments of even all these men and women in the defense forces, including the police itself, there must be some kind of executive tenure. Look at the process system in America. When some people are appointed to all these institutions, the CIA and so forth like that, the president who appointed that person cannot just wake up and say, I'm removing you. There must be a reason. Remember, these people go through, because of the unicameral system, like in America, you start with House of Representatives and then you go to Senate and so forth like that, and then there are all these approvals. So in other words, yes, whereas the president has right to appoint these people, the president of America, it's up to now the Senate to ratify. They are ratifying on behalf of the people of America. Zambia can learn from that. Once someone is ratified, that person becomes a public officer who is amenable not to the president, but to the people. And that's why, look at what happens in Zambia, the disaster. How can a member of parliament go to parliament and swear that I'm going to pay allegiance to the president? A judge, I will pay allegiance to the president. Everybody, that oath is problematic. It's colonialistic, must be trusted. We need to be ashamed of ourselves. The people of America, office bearers, they swear to uphold the Constitution, the rule book. I don't know how much more I need to emphasize this point. You can't swear to pay allegiance to the president when you're a member of parliament, when you are a judge. You swear to pay allegiance to the Constitution. Meaning no one is above the Constitution, including the appointing authority. How can anyone have justice before the courts of laws, where the appointing authority can remove a judge? And since independence, we have never seen the removal of judges at the rate that we have seen since 21. You can compare. Sit down and reflect. Never since independence have we seen the removal of judges as we have seen from 2021 to date. This is a scandal. And you need to be ashamed of yourselves. What has happened to our republic? What has happened to Insoni? Even just Insoni. I don't know what you can say Insoni. This is not good. Now, in other words, You are setting a precedent for what can come out before you. When the same people you put in a way that others don't approve, somebody rises to power, they'll be easily removed. That no, this is normal. It's my time. Let him remove everybody and put my own judges. No one today who has been imprisoned can be said to have been fairly imprisoned. No one today who has been prosecuted can be said to be fairly prosecuted or fairly arraigned for the courts of law. The intelligence community must also be impartial. You don't interfere. You don't place the intelligence community under capture. These are men and women who labor. These are men and women who have vowed to put their lives on the line. The intelligence community is a community of unsung heroes. And I want to say this at this juncture, at this point in time, that when it comes to public order, as I'll show by decided cases, a very important landmark case, the police cannot stop anybody from assembly, from meeting. You cannot do that. The police only need be informed, that's all. Should there be a crime? Because the police act on after a fact. After a fact. You commit a crime, you are disorderly, the police will come in to enforce the law. A peaceful procession turns violent, the police will enforce the law. Damage to property or injury to another, that becomes a criminal offense. But they cannot interfere with these entrenched human rights and freedoms. The intelligence community is there to prevent. You cannot call intelligence after a fact. Somebody has been killed. Then you say this is intelligence. You are reporting on somebody who has been killed. The intelligence service must be able to report before something happens that there's a plot to do the following things. Or if you go to this area, there's a plot that you're going to be stoned, or there's a plot that your car will be taken away. That's the role of the intelligence community. Now, these men and women must be given the space. You cannot create parallel systems. We have seen these things happen, where the police, who must enforce the law, are speaking, and then we have party structures also speaking about law enforcement. And then we also have politicians who believe more in the party intelligence than mainstream intelligence. Those men and women in mainstream intelligence, they are highly trained, and they must be well remunerated. Those men and women in the intelligence community need plant and equipment, proper plant and equipment. This is good for all of us as a nation. It's not just one person, it's for all citizens. How can our country survive? Because today we even have bioterrorism. Look at what is happening. Importation of chickens. You are importing chickens, you are importing ducks, you are importing all kinds of things. You go and find a chicken from China, from whichever country, a chicken is as big as a pig. And people are eating. Without understanding that, there's what we call half-life of a chemical. These chickens are injected with chemicals to grow fast. Now, if you eat that chicken, people like big things, big everything, so you go and buy that big thing, and then you eat. Those chemicals, if the half-life is 1 year, 6 months, they will continue to act in your body. And that's why we have so many cancers today. Now, how can our intelligence community be able to detect all these dangers that the population is subjected to? That's bioterrorism, as far as I'm concerned, or we are concerned. These are things that must be stopped, but they need plant and equipment to stop all these kind of things right at the borders, the entry points into our country. So security is paramount. Security is part of economic stability. Security is key. So these men and women in the intelligence community must be given proper plant and equipment with every resource that they need. The current men and women that we have are very professional. They're not like the special branch of those days. Because the special branch was just political, just became something else. I'm talking about the mainstream intelligence. So when I talk about law and order, the unsung heroes who are not in the uniforms that we see, and yet they are key to the success of the nation's stability, security. We must always keep them at the back of our minds and be able to honor them and salute them and also thank our men and women in defense and security for the peace that this country has enjoyed. We salute them. The Drug Enforcement Commission, Anti-Corruption Commission, Financial Intelligence Center. So all these are part of the governance system of the country. The moment it is seen that these are being interfered with, there is no investor. They can pledge, but there is no single investor who can come to a country where there's such abuses. The current government state managers promised us that once elected, they had already organized from their friends. They said they were businessmen, they had connections, and that they had mobilized $54 billion in foreign direct investments. That's what they said. But the moment they go into power, the dollar by 14 hours after swearing in at 10 o'clock, it will strengthen. Fuel will be 5 kwacha. I didn't say that. I'm saying what they said. Now, how can that $54 billion, if it's true, come? If it didn't come, one of the reasons is you yourselves, you become your own enemies. You start abusing the law. There is no one who can go to a country where there's abuse of the law, where there's arbitrariness. No one can go and visit such a country. They want stability. They want to know that if they go to court, they are going to find an impartial judiciary. These reports in the media, so judge has been removed. 20 judges have been appointed. 10 have been removed. It's not helping our country. It gives a gloomy picture out there. These kind of developments since 2021 have not helped our country at all. And whoever the advisors are, they must be really taken to task over this kind of things. It's not correct. It's totally incorrect. So, fellow citizens, when I'm talking about the non-selectivity in the application of the law, it's very important that we have a fair playing ground. Now, let me come to Christine Mulundika, decided case, and 7 others. Christine Mulundika and 7 others, and the people. Normally, lay people say versus the people. Christine Mulundika and 7 others versus the people. So, it's supposed to be Christine Mulundika and 7 others and the people. In that judgment, landmark judgment of the Supreme Court, Christine Mulundika, our in-law, I'm saying may our memory be for a blessing, and 7 others who are INIP members. And I want to commend one of the courageous lawyers then was part of the legal team, Mangala Zalomes, who is now the chairperson of the ECZ. And I want to speak to her conscience as well, that today you are presiding over a very important institution of governance, the ECZ. Who knows that God made you go through those fights when you stood with UNIP as a lawyer in order for a time such as this today, where in the privacy of your room, think of that moment and leave a legacy to run that ECZ fairly, without any influence, to know that is a legacy to build, to know that your accountability is to the people and not appointing authority. Once appointed, your accountability finally is to the people of Zambia. And it's God above you. Remember that. So, in that case, over which Mangala Zalomes, if my memory serves me right, was part of the legal team. I don't know if maybe Lady Muta can remember. I'm remembering that case very clearly in 1996. When members of UNIP were arrested, Magistrate Court appealed the ruling, passed the judgment, they appealed to the High Court, the judgment was appealed, then they appealed to the Supreme Court. What was the contention there then? I think section 4, subsection 5, I think, of section 5, section 5, subsection 4, 5, or the other way around, which provided for the getting of a permit before holding a public meeting or having an assembly. That's the Public Order Act, that clause. So, They appealed against that. And what were some of the facts? Just hold on. If I can get that. I think I want to go to the facts so that the notes again. So, and I'll go through my little notes. This was an appeal in the Supreme Court in which the appellant challenged the constitutionality of some provisions of the Public Order Act, especially Section 5, subsection 4, so I was right, which requires any person holding a public gathering to obtain a permit, and contravention of which is criminalized by Section 7 of the very Act. Very important. The challenge is against the requirement of a permit and the prosecution of its absence thereof on the basis of the fundamental freedoms and rights guaranteed by Articles 20 and 21 of the Constitution. A subsidiary challenge was made relating to the exemption of certain offenses from the need to obtain a permit, which is said to be discriminatory contrary to Article 23 of the Constitution. Now, what was the issue? The issue before court, the Supreme Court, was whether Chapter 104, Section 5, subsection 4 of the Public Order Act is unconstitutional and inconsistent with Article 21 of the Constitution. Now, what was the ratio decidendi? Section 5.4 purports to create a chance of denying people their freedom of speech and assembly by making an application for permission necessary, the application of which can be denied if the officer on duty is not satisfied with it. That's a policeman or policewoman. The purpose of the Public Order Act, Cap 104, is to regulate public meetings, assemblies, and processions, and not restrict them. To do that, the regulating body must be notified in advance. However, this notification should not be an application, but a notice to the regulating body for them to put parameters in place in order to maintain public order and peace. For the argument of certain government, certain government offices being exempted, it is self-evident that it is discriminatory and contrary to the constitutional provisions. What was the wording? The wording was that the Supreme Court held that subsection 4 of Section 5 of the Public Order Act, Cap 104, contravenes Articles 20 and 21 of the Constitution and is now and void and therefore invalid for unconstitutionality. The appeal was allowed. What does therefore this mean? There is no law in Zambia that requires a citizen or citizens to go and get a permit from the police. They have no right to issue any permit. It's unattainable. It's not based on any law. It's illegal. This cannot be entertained. The public, whoever wants to hold a procession, a gathering, an assembly, they only need, the person only needs, or the people, they only need notify the police. Notifying is not equivalent to a permit. So, it's crazy that people notify the police and the police respond denied. What are you denying? You are just being notified. People must go ahead with the procession. Strictly speaking, that's the letters of, I'm talking about letters of the law, and going by this precedent, this landmark ruling of the Supreme Court. So, I mean, that provision is illegal, it's unconstitutional. In inverted commas, when I say unconstitutional, it's an act of parliament, remember that. So the people have a right to demonstrate. They have a right to peacefully demonstrate, by the way. They have a right to assembly, right to association. These rights are entrenched in Part 3. They were entrenched under that same Schedule 2, which we've been amending. They are still entrenched today. So you cannot take what is provided in an act of parliament to be superior to the mother of laws. You cannot do that. So the announcement by some bodies that they want to have a procession, they want to peacefully demonstrate against Bill 7. Need not that procession doesn't need to be approved by the police. They will notify you. It's your job. It's a job of the intelligence community to be given resources, to be given plant and equipment, to go out there, to go and collect intelligence information. Are there elements that want to take advantage of this to bring about any issues? If those they find them before a fact, then they might be brought to book. If there is nothing suggesting after gathering intelligence, suggesting that people, this is going to degenerate into something else, and then someone during this procession destroys property, it's the duty of the police to enforce the law. That's the rule of law. To detain that person, to prosecute the person, to arrest and prosecute perpetrators. So the police only need be informed. You cannot say, no, be busy, will not have sufficient manpower. It's incorrect to think like that. The police belongs to the people of Zambia. And if there's such a process, you can bring the police from Lai, you can bring the police from Kamfinsa or wherever. You can bring the police. Unless you are saying there's another procession in Kitwe, there are too many processions, you are too overwhelmed. Maybe that could be answered. But even then, you have no right to deny. You have no right to interfere with this right which is entrenched. So Bill 7, demonstrations against Bill 7, or speaking against Bill 7, is an idea whose time has come. We can't go on this path. We can't have anybody who comes, let me change the law now so that I can remain in power for 7 years, or 20 years, or 30 years. We can't do that. We've been through that path. And the people of Zambia have always stood up in order to fight against that. There are more urgent issues to attend to. Why should we want to spend millions to go and appoint a useless committee, some committee, let them review? What are they reviewing? They're starting to review. The people submitted in 1972 to the Chona. The people submitted in 1990 to the Mvunga Commission of Inquiry. The people submitted in 1994, 95, and 96 there to the Monakatwe. The people submitted to the Mongomba Constitutional Review of Commissions. And their submissions, if you look at all these submissions, they are almost exactly the same. The people of Zambia have been very consistent. They know what they want. Because Zambia has a confused system, a hybrid presidency and parliamentary system, Westminster system. If the president is a member of parliament, then you need to have a parliamentary system where we go, let people vote, and then the party with the majority forms government. Like South Africa, where the president is not a member of parliament. But Zambia is a hybrid of all kinds of confusion. This is a confused state. Zambia is the only confused state. We need to be concerned about this. We need to come out of this confusion and know that you cannot condemn, you cannot entrust the destiny of the entire nation in whoever is present at a particular time. We need to dismantle. We need to dismantle most of these structures that we put there. Look, even this issue of the IDC, Industrial Development Corporation, the president, whoever is president, is the chairperson of the IDC. Meaning all state-owned enterprises are chaired effectively, therefore, by the president of Zambia, whoever is president of Zambia. I'm not talking about individuals. I'm talking about the law as it is. Now, how can the president, who is effectively chairing all state-owned enterprises, be able to condemn himself, criticize himself or herself when this fails, when ZESCO fails? When the energy sector fails. I'm talking about ERB and all these useless bodies, which must be scrapped off. There's need to take stock of all these things. There's need to call state governance to accountability. It's not too late. Zambia is for all of us. Zambia for all. And over Zambia, we shall not sleep. Anyone thinking that by intimidating the people, unleashing the police, unleashing some elements, following people with machetes, all kinds of things. Some maybe could even be foreign elements. Follow that one. Silencing distance has never worked anywhere in the world. Kenneth Kaunda once stood up challenging imperialists. He said, we shall not change our position on this position. Whether you kill us, doesn't matter. He said, out of our blood, Zambians shall be born. We are going to fight for these liberties who fight for freedom. A human being was made in the image of God. And therefore you cannot abuse a human being. When the wicked rule, there's injustice in the nation. There are difficulties in the nation. When the righteous rule, there is justice. There is light in the nation. Why do you want to make it difficult for the people to exist? Why do you want people to be in darkness? Are you apostles of darkness? You found light, you bring darkness. And 4 years is a lot of time to do something about these situations. It's not enough to apologize to the people of Zambia. As a matter of fact, Zambians must be compensated. Beyond this, there must be a commission of inquiry. ZESCO, we are bringing an action, remember, against ZESCO. We have put everything together. We are taking an action against ZESCO to start with. First of all, we are getting an expert order to stop any possibility of exports of electricity. If such things are happening, it must be stopped forthwith until the many matters are addressed. What are these many matters? We want to get an order of mandamus to compel ZESCO, a public corporation, to be able to tell the people of Zambia how much from all this, from Chishimba, from Kariba, from Kafue Gorge, how much power are we generating, even in face of the so-called drought, from Mamba Corridors. All this, we need an accountability. And we need to know why we are not shedding citizens, why are not shedding the mines. There are many scandals in this country. ZESCO produces the power, and then you have all these some energy corporation boards, or companies that are buying from ZESCO, and then they are selling at higher prices to the mines. This country has been ripped off. These are economic hit managers, as we have said before. Where can ZESCO make more resources from that and be able to invest in even more power generation projects? What is wrong with us? What is wrong with this country? These are fundamental questions that we need to ask ourselves. And we should not shy away from asking these very important questions. If anybody ever thinks that we shall not ask these questions, we shall ask these questions of our country. If you think you're above us, you're not above the citizens. We are all equal shares in this enterprise, the Republic we call Zambia. Every citizen has one share. No one has two shares, irrespective of position. And remember, every elective position is given concrete meaning by the electors, by the people. So you're not superior to the people. The ultimate owners and decision makers of this country are the people. And we want to urge the people to go and register to vote in numbers. Go and verify your current existing registration status. This is very important, because that right to vote is the only weapon that we have. You don't need to pick stones. You don't need to pick machetes. That right to vote, that voter's card. And we need to invest in protecting the vote. The people of Zambia must join nations of the world, must join Malawi, must join America, where protecting the vote has become a very important civic duty. We must protect the vote against the thieves, possible thieves, electoral thieves. We must protect the vote in 2026. All of us must unite and demand for accountability, and demand justice, and demand equality before the law. No one is above the law. We cannot have some kind of kangaroo courts We cannot have some kind of kangaroo kind of governance systems. You cannot afford to have that. We cannot afford to have that. We need to stand up and know that we have this sacred duty, this sacrosanct duty to stand up for a republic. We cannot be comfortable anymore in our houses as long as I'm eating. No, you are eating, someone is not eating. You are eating today because somebody didn't eat, somebody went to stand up and fight for freedom. So we need to be responsible. It will be responsible of this generation to adopt an nonchalant kind of attitude and let things just play themselves out. No, we need to take the destiny of our country. This is our country. We need to take the destiny of Zambia in our own hands. And let's stop talking about all these things of economic growth, inflation. So it does not matter if there is no food on the tables of the citizens. It does not matter if the cost of living is too high. It does not matter if the people are living in darkness. It does not matter if so many trained young people, economists, lawyers, health workers, they are still on the streets. It doesn't matter. It only matters. We can sing about economic growth and stability if those citizens are in jobs. If those young people who have set up projects like metal fabrication are given the electricity they need, that's not too much to ask for. If in the calendar days, UNIP days, some districts that were not connected to the national grid, government invested in huge gensets, in the districts, huge gensets to supply power to the people. If you care about supplying power to the people, why can't a sensible government, if genuinely, I'm just assuming, let's assume that we're not selling electricity. Let's assume, though that's subject to investigations, and we are going to court to investigate that, so that JESCO can come and tell us the truth about what's happening to our electricity. We are doing it maturely, in a civil manner, legally. So, now let's assume for once that, all right, yes, JESCO is not producing enough electricity. Okay, thank you. Now, what has been done since 2021? In order to invest in, forget about solar, we can talk about all these things. Don't let the people start governing themselves. And you are proud of that. Buy solar. People have solar. 3 hours is now people have solar. In solar, I've been talking about it. In solar, because when the citizens are being made to go and buy all these things, of which some of the people, because someone is benefiting from this, there are some people who are part of the governing system, part of the state managers, who have invested in huge renewable energy projects. So they are outmade beneficiaries. That's why beyond this, there must be a forensic audit to know all firms, to know who benefited from this. And they must be brought to book. They must answer. There must also be a proper audit. And government must be able to compensate the people of Zambia who have invested in their own solar, because in the first place, they are what we call opportunity costs. If a citizen today wanted to invest in something for the family, in a business, now they couldn't do that, and they got to invest 70,000 kwacha, 75,000 kwacha, 80,000 kwacha in trying to put up all these kind of solar systems. It means that you deny them that opportunity to invest in other things because one particular corporation didn't act responsibly, or because they had a government that didn't act responsibly. That's what we need to do judicial review. By order of society, judicial review in the actions of the state. They must be taken to court for irresponsibility, for being reckless. How can a foreign government in our own country, on our public television, come to thank Zambia? Namibia, thanking Zambia for how Zambia is maintaining supply of electricity to Namibia. In a country of normal people. In a country, how can you as a father or a mother, as a parent, your children are going without meals, without the basics. Then somebody comes to thank you, thank for helping our family, our children go to school. How can you, what kind of a father are you? Would you be described? These are pertinent questions that we must ask and decide. It's about time for a people's movement to reclaim the glory of the country. It's time to take back our country. Power back to the people. Take back our country. It's the song that we need to sing every morning, that we need to sing at lunchtime. It's a song that we must sing before we sleep. taking back our country. That's where we are. Zambians must take back their country. Zambians must be in charge of their destiny. Take back our country now.